Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm actually going to turn things over to my colleague Laura, who will formally welcome everyone on behalf of the Justice Future CoLab and frame the conversation a little bit. We have a packed set of presentations this morning on a number of different cases relating to earthquakes, crises, and HLP responses. And I'm really excited for those of you joining us and really excited for the conversation that we're about to have. So Laura, if I could turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jason, and hi everyone, colleagues. Very pleased to welcome you today to another Justice Futures CoLab conversation, this time on housing, land, and property rights in the aftermath of earthquakes. I think most of you are now familiar with the Justice CoLab conversations that are hosted by the Global Program for Rule of Law and Human Rights. The idea is really to provide a space for thinking together, testing and challenging ideas and assumptions around specific, complex, justice-related issues by engaging multiple perspectives, combining exchange of knowledge, expertise, to achieve deeper understandings, explore together, and hopefully develop new insights for how to address those issues. So today, the Justice CoLab is going to focus on sharing lessons, explore innovative legal aid practices, and discuss how housing, land, and property responses can be better integrated into post-disaster recovery in earthquake and crisis-affected settings. As we all know, earthquakes have dramatic consequences for affected communities. They are responsible for thousands of deaths, injuries, trauma, large-scale damage and losses of infrastructure that only completely disrupt the life of individuals, the economy, and the functioning of existing public services, which makes it particularly challenging for national authorities and their partners to respond. As we will hear from some of the speakers today, the challenges can only be exacerbated in fragile, conflict-affected, and crisis contexts, even if it can also open entry points previously not accessible. We all know that UNDP engages alongside humanitarian partners and other UN entities through the UNCT and other existing or ad hoc coordination mechanisms in early responses in the aftermath of crises and disasters, including earthquakes. The principles and modalities of these interventions are outlined in the recently published Early Recovery Policy Framework. You might have seen it if this is your area of work. So UNDP's interventions in early recovery include targeted initiatives to assist the affected individuals, households, communities, and institutions, prioritizing the most vulnerable and aligning with the commitment to leave no one behind, while at the same time already laying the foundations for longer-term recovery and framing long-term visions for national actors consistent with development priorities of the country. So this is a clear operationalization of the HDP nexus that calls for humanitarian development and peace actors where relevant to align their interventions and coordinate. So for UNDP, providing immediate relief goes along with building the capacities, usually goes along with building the capacities of the national actors to lead the processes, coordinate the interventions through nationally driven programs. It's the same approach that we already discussed for those who were part of it in the conversation when we delved into the thematic of access to justice and legal aid in situations of forced displacement, conversations that we had with colleagues from UNHCR. The collective outcomes that we need to achieve lies in the capacitation of national actors. In our case, for today's conversation, rule of law institutions, legal aid bodies, lawyers, CSOs, and the legal empowerment of the communities they serve. So today we are looking at the very important critical issue of housing, land, and property rights. The rights that are referred to collectively as HLP rights are interdependent and partially overlap. The right to housing is the right to obtain and occupy a safe and secure home in which to live in peace and dignity. The right to land refers to entitlements to land that are recognized socially or legally. And property rights refer to the right to own property and decide how is it used. Earthquakes obviously have devastating impacts on HLP rights. They displace huge number of people whose houses have been totally or partially destroyed. And the first response is to provide them with shelter. But people may also have lost their legal ID, property documents, the formal land records might be destroyed, the registries, and so on. Existing conflicts on land can be exacerbated by the displacement, and new conflicts can arise, calling for conflict-sensitive approaches, due diligence in shelter assistance, support to dispute resolution mechanisms. As we know, these situations usually disproportionately affect women, indigenous communities, and the most marginalized sectors of the population, who often lack documentation or tenure security in the first place, making the treatment of those cases particularly complex. The objectives of the CoLab conversation today are to contextualize legal aid and HLP needs in post-earthquake recovery, and we'll have a closer look at the legal and protection challenges that arise in post-earthquake contexts to housing, land and property, and legal aid programming. Secondly, we want to draw comparative insights from different earthquake recovery experiences, sharing lessons and good practices. And today we will hear experiences from Myanmar, Syria, Nepal, and Turkey. I would like to promote adaptive rights-based legal aid models. So we are giving a closer look at innovative and inclusive legal aid and HLP approaches, such as collaborative dispute resolution and document recovery to ensure effective support for affected populations. And lastly, inform future programming and facilitate co-learning. The idea is to foster knowledge amongst us, UNDP staff and partners, to strengthen legal and HLP responses in post-disaster environments. So hopefully this conversation can also help future programming in this area. Thank you. And back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for getting us started and sort of framing both UNDP's early recovery, early response mechanisms and approaches, and then also the HLP issues that we're going to discuss today. This conversation actually was initiated by our colleagues in the Myanmar country office in the aftermath of the earthquake there. And with a desire to reach out and see how we UNDP, but even beyond that in the UN system, have responded to these crises globally. So I'm excited now to move the conversation to Myanmar and Jose, who is working on our response there and can help share with us what has happened in Myanmar, what is happening, and sort of what gave rise to this inquiry in the first place. So over to you, Jose.
Thank you very much. In UNDP Myanmar, we have a long-standing HLP program where we support civil society organizations to provide legal aid, adaptive legal aid in the Myanmar context to ethnic minorities, vulnerable communities that are in conflict area, displaced persons, etc., etc. So when the earthquake happened, it became very clear very soon that we had to look at how could we help vulnerable victims to address their HLP concerns after the destruction of their housing and other infrastructure, and how could we address issues in urban environments, because we had been working primarily in rural areas, right? So could you allow me to share my screen if that is possible? Let me see. I think you may need to make me, let me see. Okay, so basically we had a bit of a reflection. We reached out to you and to other actors, also to NRC, Norwegian Refugee Council, people that had worked in the Syria response and the Turkey response, to come up with some ideas on what did we have to do to address the justice, access to justice and protection concerns in this crisis. So just to give you the essence of it in a nutshell, we realized that HLP rights in the response were critical. It was necessary to meet centrality of protection considerations, ensuring that assistance was not misallocated or misused, and ensuring that the rights of vulnerable communities are respected. It is very clear that civil society organizations and relevant development and humanitarian actors need resources to act, to ensure a conflict-sensitive, due diligence-oriented response, ensure the recovery of personal and property documentation, equal access to housing, and in broad terms, a conflict-sensitive, protection-informed response to the earthquake. When we talk about housing, land, and property rights, Lara already briefly mentioned, but just to point out to the prevention of forced eviction element in housing rights, which is very relevant to the earthquake response, the land rights elements which call for the recognition of title that may be informal or outdated or customary, and of course property rights, which prohibit irregular expropriations, or as we call them in Myanmar, land grabs. The HLP rights in earthquake responses are essential for many reasons. I already mentioned several of them, but perhaps to highlight some, they are needed to support localization, making sure that civil society organizations have a role. Civil society organizations and legal aid CSOs in Myanmar know very well their ground. They know the people, they know how to deal with the military capture institutions and the ethnic armed organizations, and they are crucial. So they are the ones that can best help the vulnerable victims. And of course, there are gender implications. Women, HLP rights need to be paid attention. Also, the risk of gender-based violence that I will talk about. But just to give you a glimpse of the impact of the March 2025 earthquake, 55,000 houses destroyed at a minimum. Families today remain displaced in inadequate shelters that often lack the minimum adequacy conditions to ensure the protection of displaced persons. There are increasing forced evictions with no effective remedies, insufficient funding for housing, land, and property rights responses, and a very difficult scenario where the area affected by the earthquake is controlled by different de facto authorities. On one side, the ethnic armed organizations and the People Defense Forces of the National Unity Government. On the other, the military captured State Administrative Council, which is the name that the military has given to this power that resulted of the 2021 military coup. There are 5 main responses in relation to HLP. First of all, due diligence. Secondly, addressing lost documentation. Third, access to adequate housing. Fourth, addressing claims and disputes. And fifth, very importantly, trying to help with the many mitigating impediments and undue restrictions in accessing justice in Myanmar, which very often amount to administrative violence. The Myanmar Civil Society Program developed a adaptive legal aid response, which we called 4 years ago, right after the coup, we called it the interim protection. Interim because the institutions are non-responsive, they are not rule of law institutions, they are military captured with inadequate laws, arbitrary, discriminatory, anything you imagine of this type of institutions. So what we are promoting is strategic legal aid work where we deal with these authorities mostly indirectly, supporting the victims, making them as legally empowered as possible, developing methodologies to address disputes before they reach the authorities through mediation, through facilitated negotiation, and doing a lot of research on what could be the models for the future. And of course, always learning, because it's a very complicated and very nuanced scenario. We try to promote due diligence. Due diligence is a process that should be adopted by any humanitarian and development actor before intervening in a conflict scenario. There has to be a conflict analysis. Agencies should ask themselves, okay, what does my intervention mean in terms of politics, in terms of power holders? What is going to be the impact of my response on the state administrative council, the ethnic armed organizations, etc. Then there has to be a more nitty-gritty process of identifying the HLP rights holders, including minorities, which there are a lot in the conflict-affected area, documenting formal and informal rights, in many cases doing a community verification, which often, to be frank, is good enough if what you're going to do is just a small repair or some minor rehabilitation. And of course, identifying possible disputes, which I will talk about now, facilitating agreements and always capturing knowledge. The recovery of lost documentation in Myanmar is a huge, difficult issue because Myanmar has a very special legal framework based on a discriminatory law enacted by another military leader, General Ne Win, in 1982. And this law is basically designed to exclude persons of Indian descent, non-recognized minorities like the Rohingya, which you probably have heard about, and which creates an intricate administrative system which is very difficult to navigate for minorities. So especially Muslims who have lost their documentation in the earthquake will have a very hard time recovering these personal identification documents, which are essential in any case then for having a bank account, for moving freely, for accessing work, education, etc. No? So the earthquake basically increased the risk of statelessness. That's the end point of the previous issue. Then adequate housing is a massive issue. The displacement sites are being closed. There are irregular evictions without a remedy. Shelter material is very expensive. Rent is skyrocketing. Many families cannot return because their buildings are unsafe. Shelter is not adequate for women and girls because it lacks locks, lighting, separate toilets in some cases. So very basic gender-based violence prevention measures are not in place yet for some reason. One of the reasons is because many of the shelters have been put by the military authorities. The obstacles for persons with disabilities have increased exponentially, also for the elderly. And then there are protection concerns that are rather serious. Young people are afraid to sleep at night in places where they may be identified during overnight checks and be basically conscripted and forced to participate in a war they don't want to be a part of. The
Jose, excuse me,
issue,
are you able to finish in the next 5 minutes or so, Jose?
yeah, I will. Sorry, it's a lot of content, but I will finish in 5 minutes. So there needs to be help to address HLP disputes. There are a variety of disputes. Titles are out of date, they are informal, rental prices increase, disputes between landowners or apartment owners and tenants. Some landowners are reclaiming the lands where displaced people are staying. The building standards are deficient, so many buildings should be adapted to higher standards before reconstruction. And many occasions, the owners are not really sure about reconstructing, which puts the homeless tenants in a difficult situation. There are a variety of disputes. To name a few, I already mentioned between landlords and tenants, but also ongoing processes of divorce, inheritance, etc., will become much more complicated because of the earthquake. There are disputes over movable property, over the allocation of shelter, over debris removal, and many other disputes. Mitigating bureaucratic impediments, administrative violence, frankly, especially in relation to the issuance of identity cards, is a big concern, especially for Muslim minorities. And there are all sorts of new impediments that require assistance. For example, victims are being coerced into paying unreasonable fees for reconstruction or demolition. So we need adaptive legal aid strategies. What are adaptive legal aid strategies? Supporting the recovery of documentation, supporting the reissuance of HLP titles, assistance with administrative permits, formalizing transfers, certifying the destruction of houses, and seeking remedies navigating the dark waters of military capture institutions on one side, and on the other, nascent ethnic armed organization institutions that are being created as we speak. So, and I'm on 13 minutes now, I see the clock. What are the recommendations? Making sure that HLP rights considerations are critical in a response that is people-centered. Supporting legal aid civil society organizations with quality funding. We have been providing CSOs with funding, but very short term, with no core funding, no funding for emergency relocations, etc. So there needs to be quality funding. And then embed an HLP perspective in all non-legal aid components of the response, capture lessons, and finally, and it's what I said at the beginning of the presentation, make protection a central consideration. In the case of Myanmar, balancing a very fine and very delicate thread between principle-based engagement and advocacy. It's not easy, but it's the situation in Myanmar at the moment. I just had a discussion with national protection actors, and basically they had the same views. So I leave it here. Over to you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Jose. Wow, those were some harrowing pictures coming out of Myanmar in the aftermath of that earthquake. And thank you for sharing some of the responses as well. Let's keep that going. and move straight into, now we have three other countries to examine. And we'll start with Nepal. If Tech, you want to
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what we found in the aftermath of the Nepal earthquake and the response to it.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jaswin. Can you please make me a co-host so that I can share my presentation in the screen?
Done.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Just a moment. Yeah. Yes. What happened? Sorry. Mm. Yes. Okay. So thank you very much. Just to highlight a few things about our experience in regard to addressing the issue, during aftermath of earthquake. As you know that Nepal is one of the prone countries from the earthquake point of view. And you might have heard that we had a critical, like heavy earthquake, which was happened in 2015, which resulted, the killing of more than 8,000 people. Likewise, 600,000 people, 600,000 structures were destructed. Likewise, there were more than 1,000 people were about, injured, very seriously injured.
Tech, did we lose you? Okay. If we want to go to a different speaker and maybe Tech can come back to us afterwards. Hala, how do I, end? How do I end his sharing is my question. There we go. Okay, Lindsay, do you want to regale? Oh, Tech, are you back?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can. We lost you for a minute. Do you want to try again?
Okay, sure. I'll do that. Sorry, I didn't know that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we cannot see you though. I mean, we can see you. You're not sharing your screen at the moment.
Okay, just a moment. I don't know what is the problem. Is it there in the screen? Not yet?
No, just you.
Okay, just a moment. I don't know what is the issue. Give me 2 minutes.
Okay. Do you want, we can come back to you, Tech, while you sort things out. Lindsay, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. I will turn my camera on for a moment, but then I will present without the camera on because I also might have a little bit of breakup with the service. Let me see if I can.
And let me just introduce you, Lindsay, just to say
Oh,
that
sure.
Lindsay is going to present on Syria and the earthquake and response there. Thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Okay, my pleasure. I just don't see the share button. It was there before. I don't see it now. Oh, here we go. Let me see. Okay. And I also see this new feature of closed captioning, which is really amazing. So that's great. Okay, so my name is Lindsay Peterson. I am the Access to Justice and Community Safety Specialist, and I am going to present alongside my colleague, Dr. Hala Risk. We are grateful to the Myanmar office for organizing this call and also to our co-hosts. So we have a lot in terms of the background, and because of the shortage of time, I'm going to try to breeze through some of it. But in relation to HLP rights in Syria, there were already a huge number of Syrians who had experienced HLP violations, which was due to the violent conflict. So this was a result of the major damage, the outright destruction of properties. This all led to the forcible displacement of over half of the population and numerous other HLP violations. I'm not going to go into so many details about what those violations consisted of. But in this context, the international community has really been focused on addressing HLP matters through a conflict-related lens, and therefore all of our advocacy efforts up to this point have also looked at HLP as more of this type of violation in the context of a conflict. So the HLP situation became much, much worse by the earthquake, and there were estimates of over 1 million properties that were damaged. A third of these were determined to be uninhabitable. And then this also posed further challenges. So not only to those who were residing in the area at the time of the earthquake, but also approximately 50% of Syrians who lacked appropriate civil as well as HLP documentation. And then this jumped to 80% after the earthquake. Digitized civil and cadastral documentation services were not to capacity, and unfortunately, they still are not. There was also no legislative or operational framework in place to address the HLP needs in the aftermath of an earthquake or any other type of natural disaster. So this was our big lesson learned to begin with. So in line with all of these, there was no specific mechanism by way of an established committee or enough expertise or specialized knowledge to address and enforce HLP rights under these conditions. But there was also somewhat of a positive change here because in Syria, we had a number of limitations in terms of how we could engage with the government institutions. And the earthquake had sort of changed the face of HLP rights. And we were able to start to open up this discussion a little bit more and start to go a little bit deeper. So just a couple other challenges I wanted to mention. Obviously, people, particularly those who were residing in the informal settlements, had a lot of difficulties proving their tenure. There was obviously a lack of shelter, and therefore there was also a strong inclination to return to buildings which were very dangerous. There was obviously a lack of basic services, and all of this sort of increased the pressure to people to sell their properties under duress. Women, they were disproportionately impacted by the conflict before the earthquake, and then the earthquake actually made their situations much worse, increased their risk of GBV exploitation and other violations. And last, the economic situation, which was already deteriorated in the country, this went into further decline. And as we see here, there was a huge impact on the loss of jobs. So as part of an initial response, so this is sort of broken into 3 stages here. So the UN we came together and we developed an advocacy document, and actually UNDP did take the lead on this process. This included specific guidance on the protection of HLP within an earthquake response. In response to the spike in needs, UNDP and UN Habitat, we collaborated together to carry out a damage assessment. And then this was conducted in coordination with local authorities within all of the different affected areas. And then UNDP deployed a surge mission who did their own assessment and provided further recommendations. We also prepared a brochure on HLP rights. This became readily available to earthquake workers. And then we started to focus our attention on training these workers. We ensured HLP was streamlined within all targeted rapid assessments. We supported the establishment of a damage so that way they were advised on safeguarding HLP rights. We also used satellite imagery to distinguish between the damage resulting from the armed conflict compared to that was resulting from the earthquake. And as a first stage of legal support, we provided legal advice and consultations within the shelters through the deployment of a mobile legal team. And this team consisted of about 80 different lawyers who had been previously trained with UNDP support, working together with the Bar Association. And then in a second stage of legal support, we set up legal clinics and citizen service centers. These were established in cooperation with the municipalities. And these helped with the proof of ownership and documentation. Sorry, I have allergies today. So the documentation, so many, as we explained earlier, there was a lot of people who were missing their civil documentation. So this included anything from identification, life events, cadastral records, housing agreements, so on and so forth. So in terms of innovative legal approaches, UNDP has been working on this for a number of years. So some of these came in quite handy when the earthquake happened. UNDP has utilized something called the Online Virtual Legal Aid Platform, which is a secure platform that's accessible to Syrians in the country as well as abroad. And it includes a number of bits of legal information. So it sort of acts as a legal awareness tool. And then individuals also have an opportunity to submit their specific questions and get legal consultation from trained lawyers. Second, we used mobile legal clinics, which we have already described. This was done with the Syrian Bar Association, as well as Syrian universities. And then we had supported comprehensive and targeted responses linking the work of lawyers and engineers together. And last to mention here, UNDP has been working on a number of different HLP due diligence guidance documents over a number of years. And this came in handy where we were supporting the rubble removal workers with mine risk awareness and safeguarding HLP rights. So in terms of conflict sensitivity and inclusion, UNDP has a context sensitivity team that regularly carries out analysis of the changing dynamics at the micro level. And this provides us with regular programmatic recommendations for doing no harm. In addition, we have worked extensively on developing specialized programming to address the needs of those who are living with disabilities as well as women. We have used the behavior science approach where we've developed targeted programming to reduce barriers faced by women and promote their access to their rights. And last thing to mention here is our relationship and partnership with the Syrian Bar Association, as well as universities and other civil society organizations. This has really allowed us to streamline legal support across different responses and ensure that legal professionals are working together with local authorities and different professional syndicates. So our lessons learned, there's a number of things to mention, but we'll try to keep it a bit short here. Really, the attention of duty bearers needs to be direct across climate, conflict, and natural disasters. Second here, no matter whatever the current condition is, HLP risk assessments should also include disaster and climate resilience, taking into account all potential impacts. Third to mention is that digital transformation of cadastral records and legal identity documents need to be a top priority of all duty bearers. And this should really be the first line in preparation to mitigate for worsening crises. Fourth, duty bearers should also prioritize targeted awareness campaigns on rights and risks related to climate and natural disasters and how individual households can be best prepared themselves. And last, there should also be preemptive capacity enhancement of national and local entities to address climate and natural disasters while safeguarding rights. I would like to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Hala, if she has anything that she would like to add.
Thank you, Lindsay. It is just final comment on the comprehensive, let's say, presentation. Thanks for Lindsay. That also in this response, we at UNDP acted as integrator. So how we also work with other UN agencies in a more cohesive manner with UNHCR and UN Habitat on as the kind of the damage assessment, but also on a developing kind of guiding notes for all humanitarian actors on how to integrate kind of HLP rights in any kind of response, and it being articulated either in the at the RC office on how to make sure that is well respected and integrated in any kind of response at UN level. Thank you all, and thanks for answer any question.
Thank you very much, Hala, and thank you very much, Lindsay, for the presentations on Syria. You mentioned some reports that UNDP has done in the aftermath of the response in Syria, and I would just say, Jose was also kind enough to share with us in the chat. I want to point everyone to a book that he has co-authored on HLP. So lots of good lessons learned and coming out. Knowledge products. We love knowledge products at the UN. Okay, let's keep going. Tech, do you want to give this another chance on
Yeah,
another
sure.
try on Nepal? Okay.
Sure. Thank you
Over to
very
you.
much. I will switch off my video. I hope it will work. So just to sharing you the slides. Yeah. Can you see the slides? Yeah.
Now we can, yes. Can you put it into presentation mode?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yes, just to give you a background, as you are aware that Nepal had a very serious, very critical earthquake in 2015, and there were 100,000 plus people were killed, and there are like many more 600,000 plus structures were destroyed, and Nepal has still been one of the countries that is prone area for the earthquake. And talking about context, there were a lot of issues happened during aftermath of the earthquake. The key thing that I wanted to highlight, key issues and challenges were, for example, the loss of property, encroachment of land, because of displacement. Likewise, the loss of civic documentation and legal deeds. Likewise, like sexual gender-based violence, rape, human trafficking. These were common issues and terrible kind of challenges that people, particularly women and vulnerable communities, had to encounter with. And at the same time, critically, there were no courts available to kind of receive neither receive nor handle the cases and complaints, because all courts were closed down, and even 40 to 50% court were not in a position to kind of have the benches run. Likewise, even human rights institutions were not fully in operation because the head office of National Human Rights Commission was already destroyed, and then the officers were not comfortable to work from. So that was the situation. And that situation, UNDP Nepal, because of our long-standing partnership with diverse, rule of law and justice sector actors, were something to intervene, to respond to those issues. So first and foremost thing that we introduced was the mobile legal aid clinic, and it was an inclusive mechanism that we developed under the leadership of Ministry of Law and Justice. And we had also, taken care of the representation of civil society, the Nepal Bar Association, of course, because they have the good outreach at different, district and the community. Likewise, we also had taken into account the presence of legal aid lawyers that, government agencies were supporting too. And under the legal aid, clinics, we had basically focused on, the first and the foremost to mobilize the lawyers to the community. And it was, self-run mechanism that we developed. and they were supposed to, conduct the assessment and at the same time gather as well as analyze the, the situation of the affected communities in the constituencies. And at the meanwhile, they were supposed to, provide counseling, legal aid counseling, legal information, and legal assistance. So these were few things under mobile legal aid clinics. And once they get, complaints, they used to kind of either refer or, directly reach out to the court and the human rights institutions so that, these institutions can receive and handle the cases. The second approach that we had, taken into account to respond to those issues was like human rights camp. It was again mobile, meaning like, more proactive mechanism. And it was established under Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission was leading the whole mechanism, whereas, we had also the representation of other commissions, like Women Commission, like, the Commission for other marginalized communities, to make it better, responsive and, to operationalize its modus operandi. We had the protocol developed, and it was, more inclusive in terms of the representation of different actors and stakeholders. And its role was, basically to monitor the situation of, again, the victims and survivors of, gender-based violence, sexual abuses, human trafficking, and those who are, in need. So the monitoring was key thing. Likewise, the investigation, and as a result of, the monitoring investigation, the mobile human rights camps were mandated to, come up with the report, and reports were, supplied, shared with the concerned government agencies. And lastly, there was also a support to the court, though courts were not running very well, but still we had the kind of opportunity to engage with them. What we did was we supported them to establish a help desk outside of their office, because office were not in a full condition to operate, so help desks were established. Likewise, we supported them to assign, someone to kind of receive and handle those cases and complaints. And lastly, it was one of the innovative thing that I can share with you, the open benches, not inside the court, but outside the court. The open benches were opened to at least to hear the cases, of again, the targeted communities. And talking about, approaches, we had a couple of approaches as UNDP globally has been, taking into account. The first one is about gender sensitivity, for which, what we had done was we, kind of made sure that women were better represented in all the mechanisms that I mentioned. And there was also a partnership with the CSOs, which were working very much on gender and on, the other marginalized communities. Likewise, while developing protocol for mobile human rights clinic and camps, one of the key things that we really focused was to make confidentiality, to ensure confidentiality, for which, protocol was developed. Accordingly, the do's and don'ts were made, code of conduct were, set. And the second thing was about human rights, based approach, under which again, the detailed SOP was developed, to make sure that, women and other marginalized communities were taken care of while, planning and implementing those programs focused on legal aid and the human rights, monitoring. The second one was, the focus was paid to women again and the vulnerable communities. And lastly, there was also a grievance handling system that we established so that, if these two mechanisms were not, working very much, one could have, one could, approach to us at country office and at Ministry of Law and Justice level. So that's how we may, at least introduced accountability mechanism. And lastly, but not least, the do no harm principles, was materialized doing, a contest assessment and taking care of conflict sensitivity. Okay, so in terms of, policy work, there were a few things that focused.
Tech, sorry to interrupt. Just two notes. One, your slides are not moving forward. I don't know if you're speaking from a different slide right now, but we're still seeing the first slide. If that's your
okay, I don't. but these slides are moving in my computer.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know. And the
Yeah.
other thing is, two or three more
Okay.
minutes, please.
Sure. In 3 minutes, I will complete my presentation. So under the policy and institutional reform, there were a few things that we had provided support. One was like business continuity plan for law enforcement agencies. Second one, it was policy work was about redefining the legal aid beneficiaries. Previously only women and a marginalized one, but like after our intervention, the legal aid policy was revised, focusing on like earthquake survivors and the survivors of human trafficking, SDBB, the victims of losing the legal deeds. These all survivors have been now redefined as the legal aid beneficiaries. And likewise, now the government has already amended the law. The law is not yet passed, but bill has already been tabled at the parliament to cover all these aspects. And the socio-psycho counseling, it has been better institutionalized now. And while we had kind of initial intervention, there was nothing in place. So after continued engagement with government, but now they have policies program, and at the same time, socio-psychological counselors introduced as the part of legal aid services. So and finally like the digitalization, though it's moving ahead, like government has to do a lot, but at least online services, online legal aid services that government has tried to introduce. So these are few things that I wanted to highlight as the key interventions at the policy level. Talking about learnings, there are a couple of. The first one is about the participation of the survivors in the legal aid and the policy reform. That's a must, like so that they can have better ownership and the issues are better handled. The second one, like in-person court management will not work. You have to really go for vital online, like case management system. Likewise, online vital registration, that is also a must now. Government has already started doing it, but previously that was not the case. Likewise, in any mechanism that will be introduced to handle the cases, handle the issues of like, earthquake survivors, you need to have like sufficient laws and policies. You need to have legitimate institutions, and that's one more learning. The assessment that, one of the colleague in my like earlier speaker was mentioning, that was not case in the Nepal, like you should have assessment first before you really intervene on the issues of like legal the legal victims, the survivors. So the preliminary assessment really makes good sense, focusing more on like housing, land, and the property related issues. Likewise, the human rights frameworks need to be more digitalized. The Human Rights Commission need also to be more responsible towards enhancing like institutionalizing digitalization, so that they can receive the case online and handle accordingly. And orientation training to your legal aid lawyers is a must, because they are well trained on conventional and traditional approach of offering legal aid services, but during earthquake that will not work. So you should really make them trained, oriented on mobile system, on like self dynamic process and procedure. And lastly, like the documentation part is equally important. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and if there is anything, I'd be more than happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tech. And I'm sure we'll hear more from you and more about Nepal in the discussion. But before we get to
Sure.
that, we have one more presentation. I am especially grateful for Samin joining us from UNICEF in the country office in Turkey to share with us some of the responses and challenges in the aftermath of the earthquake in Turkey. Samin, over to you and welcome.
Thank you, Jason. I'm also delighted to be invited on behalf of UNICEF, as I understand that most of the participants are from UNDP, and I'd be delighted to present you our unique program that we implement as UNICEF in the earthquake affected areas, the southeast region of Turkey. If you let me to be a co-host, I would like to share my screen as well.
You already have permissions.
Okay, great. Thank you. So here I have a brief presentation. I hope you see it.
We do.
Yeah, thank you. There had been a really enormous earthquake in the southeast region of Turkey on 6th of February 2023, 2.5 years ago. So as UNICEF, we have started this unique initiative called Legal Empowerment, Aid and Protection Program that we aimed for earthquake survivors, comprising of children and their caregivers, especially. Okay, I have two screens that I navigate. So what is this LEAP program that we implement in the earthquake area? So at the onset of the earthquake, just 2.5 years ago, as UNICEF, we collected feedback from the field on the legal needs of beneficiaries. At the very onset, some of them were, of course, immediate, such as representation of unaccompanied separated children, custody arrangements, registration. And some needs were mid to long term, like school and issues, adoption, paternity, and cases of violence. Of course, we aimed the cases of children as the program we're targeting, mostly children and their caregivers. And we designed this program to be implemented in 11 earthquake-affected cities and 3 densely migrated cities. The response was designed under 4 pillars. The first one is free legal aid and provision, which aimed at provision of free legal aid in specific litigation cases concerning children and caregivers through the local bar associations in the earthquake-affected areas and the migrated cities, densely migrated cities. And we targeted provision of free legal aid for at least 1,000 cases for children and their caregivers. And the second component, outreach, which consists of mobile legal counseling and referral to specialized legal services for beneficiaries residing in those affected areas. And we targeted procurement of 4 mobile units and reaching at least 6,000 beneficiaries through our LEAP program. And we have 2 other components. One is empowerment of children and caregivers through the provision of legal seminars, information sessions. And the last one is on non-legal, paralegal workforce support to improve their capacities through legal information and legal information on referral pathways. So here I will introduce what we have done in our mobile legal counseling vehicles. So we have this mobile counseling vehicle called LAW, YASA in Turkish, and it's an acronym for Legal Aid on Wheels. It's quite nice one that we promote in the region, so it attracts attention of the people. And this vehicle, right now we have 1, and we are procuring another 3. And this vehicle travels to remote and highly affected areas in the earthquake region, including container sites where the most of the people are residing. And we have a pool of lawyers whom we trained them before the counselings, mobile legal counselings in person took place. And those lawyers, local lawyers, delivers these mobile legal counseling sessions with the people affected by the earthquake, mostly in the container sites. And they follow up if their cases are really complex and needs some referrals to the legal aid scheme. And we ensure that there is a good coordination with local bar associations and they really help underserved groups in the local areas. And of course, as the program is centered on addressing the needs of children, we have designed child-sensitive legal services and trained the lawyers we have worked with for this purpose. Of course, we have encountered some challenges as well. The most prominent one was awareness raising among affected populations on the mobile legal counseling services that we have provided. As I said, we included container sites mostly in our program, but we lacked basically informing them before our vehicles reach their residence. So it would be really good to inform them, the residents of the container sites, that legal counseling will be provided in a given time frame, let's say 2 months ahead, so that they would be prepared and our lawyers would be prepared as well. So I took note of the good example from Syria on virtual online legal aid support, where people could submit their specific questions. So that would be great if we did the same in our program, so that our lawyers would be prepared for the answers they would provide. So another challenge that is linked with this issue is supervision issue. Supervision to be provided to lawyers giving this mobile counseling to the residents. Actually, we couldn't provide the supervision. We only could provide some trainings beforehand to the local lawyers, but now we are redesigning our program and incorporating supervision component to ensure that the services, the quality of the services, and the effectiveness of the services is on place. So it would be good from the beginning to put in place some supervision components so that the program is implemented at local level smoothly.
Samin, 5 more minutes, okay?
Okay, thank you. So coming to the property rights. You see the map of Turkey and the affected areas from the 2023 earthquakes. So in this 11 provinces in the southeast region and 3 other cities, I exclude that 3 other cities, but in the 11 provinces, the earthquake affected loss of civil and property, heavily damaged the region. So of course it caused some loss of civil and property documentation and also mass inner city and intercity displacement. And Turkish government launched a reconstruction program and began the construction in designated so-called reserve areas. So what is that? This designation of these reserve zones, reserve areas by the government came with its challenges, as it suspended some individual property rights and with cancellation of the property documentation in the reserve zones. And this really created some unclear or undocumented property ownership and confusion and tension within affected communities. The reason was that there have been some unclarities on the right to return to the exact location where people used to own land in the reserve areas, or they might rebuild houses in their own property. So what we have done as UNICEF, I will explain it here. So we, of course, evolved our legal aid provision in the region. You see our YASA mobile legal counseling vehicle here serving in the container site. So as I said, we first focused on civil issues, mostly for children and caregivers, but then we channeled our support for legal aid and mobile legal counseling on property rights. And we trained our lawyers on this housing and property issues that have emerged after the earthquakes, and they started providing information to the people they have met in the container site. They are those people who don't have the means to rent some other apartments, etc. So they stay in this temporary accommodation centers, namely container sites. So we have provided them with information for this, for their property claims and access to compensation. And of course, we are continuing to reprogram our LEAP program to respond to this long-term reconstruction. And right now, we are supporting them in the dispute resolution around construction in the reserve areas. So my last point will be our lessons learned. What would we do if we had the same experience right now after 2.5 years in the region? So of course, when it comes to property rights, you have some institutions, government institutions on disaster coordination and urban planning. And of course, from the very onset, it includes humanitarian response in the region. So it would be very valuable for us to build that cross-sectoral collaboration between legal aid, protection services, which we aimed from the very beginning, but also building that link with the disaster coordination and urban planning, which is the second phase of any disaster or earthquake in a region. So that it would be great if this link is established from the very beginning, from day one. And another recommendation from our LEAP program would be proactive planning before a disaster occurs. Currently in UNICEF, we are doing this, although we don't have that emergency programs as UNDP. However, right now we are programming ahead of a new emergency, and we are preparing for creating pools, for instance, lawyer pools, that can be in the region from the very beginning. And with this pre-trained lawyers, legal aid responses could be put in place very rapidly and deployed in underserved areas. This is all from myself. If you have other questions on our program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you, Samin. So I really deeply appreciate all the presentations, and now we have about 20 minutes for discussion. These could be questions, these could be sharing reflections on what you heard or your own experiences. Would anyone like to get us started with, and it could be one of the presenters as well who was inspired by something they heard. Yeah, Jose, please go ahead. David, you're up next.
Yeah, I think for me, there are three main issues, as I was listening to the other presenters. First of all, that you need a strategy. There has to be an overall recovery strategy, which includes HLP protection safeguards, but also other protection safeguards. Child protection, we've heard, persons with disabilities, ensuring non-discrimination. And then secondly is the whole question about adaptive. What does adaptive mean? No? And we've heard many different ways to include people. I loved the lawyers on wheels example of Turkey. That's absolutely amazing. But there are many other adaptive measures that we can take to completely different contexts. But these are always, I think the three of them are one way or the other: crisis, fragile, context where the institutions require special strategies, no? And then thirdly, the importance of understanding the context both before and during the crisis, no? And understanding what works, because at the end we have all of these activities in place, but to what extent do we know, what is the impact, no? So over to, I guess, David is the next one.
Yep, thank you. David, please.
Thank you. Hi, Jason. Thank you for organizing this meeting, and thank you for the colleagues for their presentations that offered a range of perspectives. I'm David Videira. I work with UNDP Iraq currently, and my question is related to a post-conflict context rather than a post-disaster one. So tell me if I'm off topic. But in a donor landscape that is dwindling quite a bit, and in an HLP space that is already sometimes strongly occupied by other agencies, in our case, it's IOM and UN Habitat, how did the different country offices manage to engage with donors to carve a space for UNDP to engage in HLP programming? And is there a UNDP global framework that provides an added value to UNDP to engage in this file without looking like we're stepping on each other's toes? Sorry, I hope my question is clear. Thanks.
It is, David. And let me just say, if any of our presenters or anyone on this call, I mean, the idea is to bring us all together to learn together. So if anyone has ideas and, answers, or there may not be concrete answers to David's questions or any of the others, let's make this a conversation. But let's get a few more points as well. Ravai, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Perhaps I would like to start by really thanking the colleagues for all the presentations that they've made, but also to congratulate them for all this really, really critical, important work under very, very difficult circumstances, and really completely agree with all the different strategies that colleagues have managed to put in place in order to respond and to be adaptive and to be agile under conditions which are obviously very strenuous and stressful. I wanted to just pick on to the point, perhaps not, I wanted to pick on to the point on digital, but before I do that, let me just respond very briefly to David in terms of, what is the UNDP framework and what does it look like, and how do we implement this without feeling like we are stepping onto the toes of other, more humanitarian actors that are in the space. And for UNDP, you may recall or may be aware that part of our work, even in our central bureaus, we also have the Crisis Bureau. And within the Crisis Bureau, the work that we are doing is continuing to support crisis context, both in terms of anticipation and prevention of crises, but also in response. And this is also where the connection of the HDP nexus within the work that we do on recovery does come in. So, and I'm glad Lara did speak earlier in the introduction about the most recent document that came out of the Crisis Bureau. So colleagues, maybe Lara, I don't know if it's already now online, and if there's a link, I think let's post it so that colleagues can look at it. Yes, it's very, very broadly framed, and some of the issues that we are really specifically speaking to right now may not be explained in so much detail, but it's one of the offshoots of some of the key work that we are doing on rule of law, human rights, and security in relation to post-disaster or conflict situations. I'll go back to my technical point, which was really going to be around digitalization. And I do think that digital solutions will remain a critical part and parcel of how we respond to conflicts, to disasters, to crises, whether natural or man-made, as we go through and navigate some of the complexities that we are seeing more and more in today's world. So I really just wanted to hear from the colleagues who presented how you have managed to work with your governments to go through the processes of digitizing, land record systems, the cadastral systems that the colleagues in Syria spoke about, birth and death or marriage or civil registry, broadly speaking, because I do know quite a number of our countries are still struggling to go through the digitalization processes and to keep their records in digital format. But also, even secondly, some of them are very worried about where to store this information. Some don't trust the cloud system. They think it exposes national security sensitive records. Some want offsite storage. But again, when a disaster such as an earthquake or an extreme weather event occurs, sometimes depending on what storage systems you're using, you can still remain exposed and therefore then eventually affect the recovery processes. So would like to hear some insights on that as well. Thanks, Jason. Back to you.
Thank you, Ravai. So again, I would invite any of our presenters or anyone from other country offices to weigh in on Ravai's question about the process of digitization and selling the idea of digitization to partners, helping them through what must be a massive undertaking. David also had a question.
If you allow me, I have a question.
Mamoun,
Sorry,
please
yeah,
jump
thank
in.
you. I was not able to raise my hand. I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, thank you for this important webinar. My question is for our colleague from Syria. I believe that you worked in a stateless area that time, and maybe still. What type of challenges you faced because of the absence of the state in that time, if you can? And also the same for our colleague from UNICEF in Turkey. What type of challenges you faced with the existence of the state? If this, if you would like to compare the existence of a state and the absence of a state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamoun. Lindsay, Samin, do either of you want to, or Hala as well, if anyone wants to take on that question? I guess the question is, how to work in these complex environments, either with statelessness or different dynamics within states. Yeah, Jose, you work in a complex environment as well.
Yeah, I mean, we can say that in Myanmar, the earthquake is a driver of statelessness because of, very vulnerable people lose their documentation and then they cannot recover it because of discriminatory laws. And then the issue of digitization in Myanmar it's actually a threat because the digitalization of political and administrative power in Myanmar becomes a weapon, no, in the hands of the State Administration Council. So now, for example, people are required to register for a digital ID in order to get a passport. And what happens is that when individuals try to get this digital ID, their background is checked, and then they are put at risk of detention. No, so digitalization is important that we always see that it's a double-edged sword. Then in terms of donors, there was a question in Myanmar. The situation is critical for the HLP program. Unfortunately, we've tried to coordinate with UN Habitat and the Norwegian Refugee Council, and hopefully that discussion will bring agencies together from the different perspectives. Over to the next.
Thanks, Jose. Anyone else want to jump in, either to respond to something they've heard? Yeah, Lindsay, please.
Sure. Sorry, I also cannot figure out. I'm a fish out of water on Zoom. I'm used to Teams. In the area without the state. First thing I would like to mention is, for those of you who don't know, Syria at the time of the earthquake was separated into 3 different sort of political geographical sections. The earthquake cut across 2 of those. our team was mainly focused on the area that was still under the control of the government of Syria, so the prior regime before the takeover. And then across border, that was the Northwest, and UNDP has a separate office through Gaziantep that provides services across that region. So I can speak to how we worked under the government-controlled area. And as I had mentioned in the presentation is first, because of donor red lines and UN parameters, we had a lot of limitations. And that's where we really had to rely on our relationships with civil society. So the Bar Association, which is still semi-autonomous, it's not fully autonomous, and we recognize that, but it was a window of opportunity, and it did allow us a way to provide information and services to the Syrian people. Likewise, through working with the universities and making sure that we're upskilling the next sort of generation of lawyers that are coming to the table. That's been sort of our way to work around. Now, in terms of statelessness, similarly to like what our colleague has just said, the displacement itself was a huge driver of statelessness. This is a big question in Syria. How do we address statelessness? And in Syria, I mean, if I go deeper into the laws, we have an even bigger problem of paternity rules around who can be considered Syrian and who cannot. And this is another sort of issue that we need to really tackle. I think that's going to be coming into the next phase of justice reform processes. And I could also go through the other questions now, if that's okay. In terms of how does UNDP work within where there might be some other UN agencies dominating the HLP landscape, it's definitely something that we have to contend with in Syria. UN Habitat sort of has the, they have the overriding sort of authority on a lot of the coordination structures. But what we've done as UNDP is we've developed a very positive working relationship with UN Habitat. And we have ongoing conversations across the HLP landscape. We do so much of our work together. A lot of our publications, a lot of our research has been together. So I would actually say that the best way at the micro level to combat that is through partnership and keeping that dialogue really open. HLP in Syria also, I have to say, it gave us the opportunity to work on legal issues because people, the focus has been on emergency and humanitarian for a very long time. And without the capacity to engage with the government, HLP gave us the excuse to say, well, this is a legal issue. This is, no matter what stage you're at on the humanitarian development peace nexus, this is a legal issue that needs attention, and it needs attention from the time before the crisis starts. So that's sort of where UNDP has been able to really set the groundwork for all of our rule of law programming in Syria. So this has been a very positive thing as well. HLP being on the map now, thanks to all of our colleagues who've really made this part of international law and humanitarian response. This has given us a massive opportunity in Syria. And then I think there was last on digitization. Again, this is another issue because of the issues where we aren't selling it to the government. We actually had to set this up as a separate service. And oh, well, sorry. Now, if I talk about digital services, I should make this two different things. We have digital services, which is the legal platform that we have where people are able to upload documentation, ask very specific legal questions, get legal consultations, get support with administrative processes. That's one aspect of the digital process. And then the other is the direct work with the government. And their capacities are very low in terms of digitizing the actual records of the entire population. The government, and from my perspective, and my colleagues may want to add on to this, but from my perspective, I don't think the government is adverse to it. Of course, we've had some issues. I like the word administrative violence. There's probably a lot of those issues that if you really do the research and unpack what is happening on the ground level with people who are trying to get their drug.
She generally there we go.
Sorry?
No, please go ahead. You cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Just in general, the government has been supportive of the process, but it's just a long process, and it will take many, many years to really recover all of the documentation and get it into digital form. And then we have the added challenge of so many things have been informal agreements. So on and on in that sense. Thank you. I'll end there. Over.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hala, yeah, please jump in.
Just actually 3 points to add to what also Lindsay mentioned. Regarding, let's say, digitalization, we always know that during the earthquake, yes, a lot of, let's say, kind of the documentation being lost, but also we're working in a conflict zone. It is already being impacted a lot before even the earthquake. So digitalization regarding the documentation, it needs a lot of efforts and with limited space. This is one. Regarding, let's say, the achievement regarding for UNDP during the earthquake response, to be honest, we managed to start working in informal setting because according to let's say before the earthquake, all kind of HLP support or intervention from UNDP were focusing mainly on the formal setting, while we managed to have a more kind of advocacy to make sure that we wanted to work on protecting these rights, regardless it's a formal or informal setting, and how we can protect these rights. So we managed to integrate it into what we established an operation room at the governorate level, at the head of municipality. So how to make sure that all these kind of property rights being respected and protected. Third things that a kind of achievement and kind of collaboration with UN agencies and not to step on others, let's say, kind of mandate, especially in a complex situation like Syria. We managed to foster a kind of collaboration environment rather than kind of competition environment, because the needs are huge. The demand is huge, and there is no one entity or UN agency can fulfill all these demands. Therefore, we managed to have a kind of at the technical working group among UN agencies and also NGOs and other humanitarian actors, how we can respond in a more kind of complementarity, in a more partnership approach, to see who is doing what and how we can complement each other. Therefore, for example, we have a kind of partnership with UN Habitat on conducting kind of the damage assessment after the earthquake. The UN Habitat managed to put kind of the methodology of the damage while we were implementing it within municipality, using our strong presence on the ground and an added value working with the local authorities. So with this kind of partnership, we managed to expand kind of the support for the people in need and for displaced people. So in this kind of context, we need to be innovative in approach rather than to see who is mandate on doing what. Over.
Thank you, Hala. And we'll make that the final word. We've reached the end of our conversation here. I can't emphasize just how rich this conversation has been and how much I've learned from it. Thank you to everyone, not just the presenters, but all the participants. I mean, the challenges are absolutely staggering. I mean, everything from loss of shelter and personal belongings and lack of basic services and land house ownership questions and competing property claims and exclusion from recovering aid, land grabbing. And in all of that is taking place in contexts of conflict and perhaps existing displacement and structural barriers to justice. And where people may already have lacked formal land or property documentation. We see, I mean, insurmountable needs, access to housing and critical services, and the need to preserve or create documentation and protect rights, support resilient recovery, and resolve and prevent new conflicts that may arise from in the aftermath of the crisis itself in a context of pre-existing conflict. And a really rich array of solutions that we heard about: legal aid, on-site legal aid, online legal aid in Syria, mobile legal clinics, the community paralegals, virtual online registration and documentation, the digitization that we discussed, of course, temporary measures as well in terms of shelter assistance. I liked what we heard about in Turkey from the empowerment, reporting, and advocacy role that we can play and that we can empower others to play. The targeted awareness campaigns, even before, on risk preparedness, before the crisis occurs. And a national response strategy that should be in place ahead of time as well. Really interesting use of technology, like what we heard about in Syria, actually trying to identify what was the cause of various destruction. And then all of this, of course, needs to be in the context of being people-centered and rights-based and informed interventions. You know, we heard about in Nepal, the preliminary assessment of HLP issues during the IDP registration, a strong role for civil society and partnering with civil society, partnering even within the UN, ensuring remedies are conflict-sensitive, inclusive, and rights-based. And again, and this emphasis that that Lindsay made on duty bearers in Syria that I thought was interesting as well. One last time, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Our presenters, Laura, Jose, Tech, Lindsay, Hala, Samin, thank you for joining us from UNICEF. Thank you to ESGI and the Governance Community of Practice for partnering with us. And I sincerely hope that this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation about these really important and interesting issues. So thank you again, and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Shukran. Thank you.